Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Marcus from InfoSec Governance, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the IASME Cyber Assurance Themes and what they are. These themes make up the core of the IASME Standard and are the same themes that are going to be used for both the IASME Cyber Assurance certification and the new IASME Cyber Baseline certification, that's for international companies. Now, if you're within the IASME Cyber Assurance Standard, there are actually 13 themes that we're going to be discussing today. Now, please bear in mind that these descriptions are not going to be quite definite, but they're going to be covering the basics, and every business will be different when they come to implement them. I'll warn you that this video is likely going to be a pretty long one, so I'll put some chapter markings in, and you can skip to the themes that you want to interest you the most. Okay, so let's get started. Theme 1. Theme 1 is all about planning information security. This theme is going on about how you as a business will plan the information security within the workplace. This theme is going to be looking to make sure that you're applying the information security within your day-to-day operations within the business. As part of this theme, you're going to also be making sure that you're making the planning for your decisions in advance and not just reacting to any events that come up. This plays a part with your change control. Any project should be planned accordingly and should take the impact of information security into account. This is information that's going to be stored on your systems. Who's going to be responsible for it? Where's the information being stored? Is there enough budget allocated? And so forth. Theme 2, organisation. So for Theme 2, we're going to be looking to make sure that there's a clearly defined structure within the business. Here we're going to be looking to make sure that the business knows who has the ultimate right to make the decisions within the business about information security. We're also going to be looking to make sure that there's a form of incident management in place as well within the business. We're also going to be looking to make sure there's a form of incident management in place as well, which we're going to be talking about in a later theme. And we also need to know who's responsible for ensuring that information is safe within the business, and if there is an incident, who's accountable for it? Who's the point of contact for it? As part of the organisation theme, we also need to know a little bit about human resource or the HR processes as well when it comes to resolving disputes within the business. So if there's a dispute, who's going to resolve it? Who's going to provide the leadership? What's the escalation path for resolving this dispute? And we're also going to be looking to see how the business manages the information resources that are accessible. Who has access to what information? Who owns it? Where's the information go? Is it externally accessible? What access do partners and suppliers have to your information? How do they safeguard this information? Is it all encrypted? Isn't it? We also need to know whether the directors or the board of the company take responsibility for any actions that come regarding risk within the business. They should do. It should be owned from top down. And this is because the ownership should, flow from the top-down part of the process. There should also be, depending upon the size of the business, a dedicated group which is used to actually manage the incidents, the information security within the business. Now, for micro businesses, this isn't going to be feasible, but for smaller businesses and up, we should be looking to make sure that there's a defined group of people in place who can manage the incidents, can communicate with the business, key stakeholders, and inform people, who needs to know about what's going on. Business should also understand its defined service level agreements, or SLAs. Now, this is both internally within the business and externally from suppliers. The internal timeframe should be going about, how do you provide services? How long does it take? How long should your phone calls take? With external stuff, what happens if your internet goes down, your email goes down? What's the SLAs to get this up and back? Theme 3 is all about assets. So Theme 3 is an important one and one that should always be undertaken by all businesses, whether they're going for IASME Cyber Assurance or not. It's best practice. This theme is all about understanding what assets you have within the business. For this theme, you should be having an up-to-date asset register, which includes asset owners, the location of the assets, but also include not only the physical assets, but informational assets as well, such as payroll, HR. The asset register should also include all the assets that are business data. This includes a high level of, bring your own devices as well. The asset register should also be kept up to date, ensuring that the assets which are removed from service are also removed from the asset register. And without this information, how would you know what information you have within the business? How do you know what to protect against attacks and incidents? So an asset register is an important part of the business, and you should also keep that up to date always. When it comes to logging the information in the asset register, you should be ensuring that when it's physical assets, you're logging where they're categories such as server, laptop, removable media. But when it's informational assets, the categories should be, employee data, contractual data, payroll data, and stuff like that. The asset register also needs to know where the information is being kept, its location, is it on a local computer, is it in the cloud, is it in a filing cabinet, and so forth. This also should be recorded for the relevant value of the asset as well. So how much does that asset cost? If you had to replace it in the business, how much would it be? Assets should also be clearly identified when it comes to information. Are they confidential? Is it public domain? Is it internal use only? And all sensitive assets should be categorized like this, and staff should be made aware of it accordingly, so they don't push out private or confidential information. When it comes to sensitive information or information being placed on external media, you should also always ensure that the information is always encrypted. So if you've got it on USB sticks, if you're sending it to anyone who's external to the business, it should all be encrypted. Lastly, you should also ensure that you review the asset register and all policies and procedures at least annually or upon any type of change, or if there's been an incident within the business, just to make sure it's all current, up to date and falls in line. Theme 4 is all about legal and regulatory landscape. So when it comes to Theme 4, this one is, in my opinion, a serious one that's always overlooked. All businesses should know what they need to comply with when it comes to any legal and regulatory compliances, whether this is just Data Protection Act, health and safety laws, employment laws, and so forth. For the IASME Standard businesses, you have to have a legal and regulatory list defined. This list should include what legal, statutory, regulatory, and contractual obligations the business needs to meet, what companies they need to be associated with, and for what information it is being associated. Is it personal information, for example? You should also ensure that you have processes in place to ensure that there's support for fulfilling any legal obligations, and just to ensure that the staff are trained appropriately when it comes to these type of legal obligations. You as a business will need to ensure that you remain compliant with any necessary requirements, and that if you do become non-compliant, you have a process in place to ensure that these are remediated and return to being compliant as soon as possible. So finding these faults and fixing them. This could be through ensuring that renewal agreements are met, staff are trained or retrained under various certifications, and policies and procedures are in line with the necessary requirements that are required. You should also ensure that your business records are protected from loss, destruction or falsification. This could be through providing backups and recovery processes, which we'll discuss later in another theme. Theme 5 is all about assessing and treating risks. When it comes to information security and protecting the business, businesses need to understand what their risks are. By understanding your risks with the business, not only business-related risks, but also cyber-related risks, internet-based related risks, you can start building out your information security management system and look at these informational assets. For IASME Standard, you as a business need to ensure that you have a risk assessment, and that this risk assessment and risk register are kept up to date upon change, after incident, or at least annually. If you don't have a risk register at this point in time, there are lots of examples available on the internet which you can review and download and then tweak for your heart's content. For the IASME Standard, it concentrates on all areas of the business, not just internet connected devices like Cyber Essentials, but all areas, informational assets and things like that. The risk register should be have up-to-date unique IDs, the name of the risk, the type of the risk, the value of the risk, the remediation controls, and so forth. This will allow you as a business to identify what risks are potential to the business, how to remediate them, what the costs would be. The risk assessment should also cover areas such as customers, suppliers, partners. For example, you're not just talking about your own internal business. It should access, all areas of the business, all systems that connect to your business, anything that has access to your business data. All business risks should be made aware of to the director level or the board, and integrate these into the risk assessment. Senior management should always be aware of what risks there are to the business, so just keeping them up to date. When working on your risk mitigations plan and risk register, you should also have an understanding of what the acceptable risk will be and what your risk appetite as a business is when it is accepting that risk. All risks should be defined in the risk register, have a risk owner. This risk owner should ensure that they're being made aware of this and then manage the risk accordingly throughout their lifetime. You should also ensure that when identifying risks and assets, which risks require encryption or additional protection measures to be put in place and things like that. The risk assessment and risk treatment plan should also be signed off by someone senior within the business, and this should be authorised to make decisions. So again, it's been ownership from the top down. Theme 6 is all about physical and environmental protections. So Theme 6 is about ensuring the business has a sufficient protection in place for its assets via physical and environmental means. This theme links up with your risk register and your asset register, and you must ensure that the risk assessment covers the risks of physical harm to any type of informational asset or physical asset. You should ensure that you have implemented any physical security requirements that might be required by law or contractual agreements, such as locks and doors, CCTV, key fobs, window protection, and so forth. You'll also need to look at physical controls what physical controls need to be put in place for the business, such as access control to doors, locks, key fob access, sensitive areas are always locked, filing cabinets are locked, internal doors are locked, and so forth. What about air conditioning for server rooms or sensitive areas? Do you need climate control put in place? And we also need to look at wireless and wired networks. Are these designed to only be accessible by authorized users only? Is your guest wireless network segregated from your main network? And then all confidential information should be kept away from information and securely stored when not required. So again, you need in this authorized access and authentication to get access to this information. You should also look at to ensure that you have covered your assets which leave your business premises, such as salespeople or engineers who leave the business's premises. How are their devices protected? Do you have the Find Me feature in place? Are they encrypted? Do they have lock screens? Are they locked to the desk when they're not being used? And so Theme 7 is people. So Theme 7 is all about people. As you might expect, it's about the onboarding processes before employment, then how staff are treated throughout their work career, right through to offboarding. We need to know what processes there are, ensuring that the documentation and processes are in place, everyone knows what to do, staff are being made aware of policies and procedures, and we also need to look at the roles and responsibilities within the workplace. Does everyone have a specific role? Do they know what this role is? Do they know what's required of them? We also need to ensure that the staff are properly trained to do their job. Do they need any special training conducted before they can actually carry out the work? All users should be granted least privilege access to do the work that they need to do. No one should be running as a local administrator for the day-to-day roles. It should be account separation in place. You should ensure that people have the necessary access to access all the information and the systems that they need to do the job. So do they have access to cloud-based systems and such like that? All staff should be aware of the threats to the business, how to identify them and who to report them to should they find one. When people leave the business, an offboarding meeting should be conducted by Human Resources or HR, and that should be to the relevant person. Ensure that all assets have also been returned, that a debrief has been carried out, and the business understands the reason why that employee is leaving the business. Theme 8, Policy Realisation. So Theme 8 is all about documentation, understanding and ensuring that your policies and procedures are up to date, that they're in place. And then for this theme, we're going to be looking to make sure that the right size of policies are in place for the size of the business. For the IASME Cyber Assurance Standard, all companies must have in place all policies and procedures which are required by the standard, but the complexity of the documentation size will depend upon the size of the business. Therefore, a micro-based business isn't expected to have a complex set of documentation compared to just an enterprise-type business. We need to see how the business distributes the documents to the staff. Is it stored in a shared area, within a portal, and so forth like that? How are staff made aware of what changes are being applied to these documents? Is it through email communication, through notifications? And then the business must also have an information security policy in place as well, and this must be kept up to date. All policies must be checked at least annually or upon change, or if there's been an incident, and it should be written by someone within the business who has authorization, and it should be written so that all staff can actually read it and understand this policy and what's required of them. The documentation must have meet certain criteria listed in the document control section. Now this document control section should be made up of these following processes. So contain the purpose of the policy, the scope of the policy, the requirements of the policy, so what do people need to do, when the policy was last reviewed, how is it being monitored and implemented and verified to make sure that it's actually working correctly? And what happens if the policy is not being followed or breached? What's the processes if someone's done something and hasn't followed the processes? All policies must be signed off by someone within the business that has the appropriate level of communication and authority within the business. And then Theme 9 is all about managing access. So Theme 9 is about access control. Who has access to what within the business? This might be data, systems, environments, offices, buildings, things like that. Here we're going to be looking to say that least privilege access is given to all employees for accessing electronic or informational systems, and then, you could call it you need to know least privilege access. You need to ensure that applications and systems are set up correctly and that staff have access to what they need to do their job role, ensuring that permissions are set up and configured correctly from the default settings. You need to ensure that any wireless systems are configured accordingly to ensure that no unauthorized access or no unauthorized people can gain access to your systems, and then just make sure that guest users are blocked from accessing business data and the business network. Making sure that all staff can log into the machines through authentication methods, and just making sure that all file shares are locked down or inaccessible to users unless authenticated on the network. You should consider, do people need any access from any locations? Should data be blocked from certain locations? For example, specific countries, just protecting that information. You should ensure that staff have session timeouts implemented in applications or screen lockouts implemented as well. So if they leave the computer, leave the session, it should log out. When it comes to people leaving the business, they should ensure that the controls in place to ensure that access is revoked in a timely manner. And going for Theme 10, Technical Intrusion. Theme 10 looks at what controls and protections are in place by the business to safeguard the business from intrusions from outside the office. So here, what we're meaning is basically, looking to see who could potentially get into your business or attack your business from external threats, so from the internet. So here we're looking to make sure that the business is blocking all threats, having account lockouts in place, blocking against password, dictionary attacks, USB devices, phishing attacks, and things like that. For this theme, we're going to be looking to check to make sure that all the controls are in place, that the business reviews its logs, its events on devices, and that you need to make sure that you've got the appropriate protection in place in your environment. So border firewalls, endpoint devices having firewalls enabled, machines being kept up to date, EDR in place, things like that. Your system should be configured to scan for vulnerabilities at least every 6 months or after major changes or following a security incident. If deemed necessary, you should conduct a penetration test if it's deemed as a necessary risk within your risk register. For controlling access to applications and mobile applications, you should ensure that you've got an approved allow list that authorizes people. Tell them what they can install, what they can't install, what's allowed on the systems, what aren't. Users should be made aware of and should be pay attention to any alerts and warnings on the computers and notify the relevant people at the time. So if they get anti-malware alerts coming up all the time, alert people. Theme 11, Backup and Restore. Theme 11 is all about backing up and restoring your data and ensuring that it works as expected. You should ensure that you're backing up the data regularly and it has all the backing up done without any errors. Any errors should be identified and resolved as soon as possible. A copy of the backups should be physically separate from the data that is being backed up on. So this could be another building, a cloud environment, and things like that. Restoration tests should be carried out regularly to ensure that the work that you're actually backing up does actually restore and you've built that confidence up. Restorations should be carried out at least every month. Backups should be recorded and tracked in your asset register just to ensure that you know what is being backed up and what isn't being backed up. Theme 12, Security, Business Operations, Monitoring, Review and Change Management. So this theme is all about change management and monitoring and reviewing your systems. You should ensure that security is embedded into your day-to-day operations and that any changes are being pushed through a change control system. You should have processes in place and these should be signed off by the relevant body within the business to say yes, you can apply these changes. You should ensure that the assets are being kept up to date with any relevant asset registers and being monitored and updated through changes. So again, it links into your asset register. Monitoring should be in place to ensure that all systems are working and they're doing what they should be doing. There's no errors, there's no warnings. Anything that should be picked up on and remediated. If you have an incident, you should ensure that you isolate the affected systems for review at a later date, and if required, should be isolated for digital forensics. Event logs on devices should be reviewed at least weekly, and any abnormal issues should be resolved as soon as possible. All logs should be stored in a protected area away from tampering, and they should be stored for at least 6 months so that you can look back, have a look at any trending, and go from there. All data should be reviewed at least annually, and ensure it's just up to date and kept relevant. Service level agreements or SLAs and contracts should be reviewed and just ensure that they're up to date. People should need to know what these agreed levels are, and there should be like an internal SLA as well as supplier-based SLA agreements as well. Any changes to the business or environment should go through a risk analysis and added to the change control process and then signed off. Any systems which are decommissioned should also be reviewed for potential risks to the business. And that might become apparent in the future. When changes are implemented, staff should be made aware of what the changes are and just make those changes when necessary. Theme of 13, Resilience, Business Continuity, Incident Management and Disaster Recovery. So this theme 13, is the last theme for the IASME Standard, and it's all about business continuity and incident management. All staff should be made aware of who's in charge if there's an incident, how to contact them. The business should also be aware that, it should make it nice and easy for the business to actually have this point of authority so everyone can come to them, get it sorted if there's an incident in place, and people know who to contact so it all goes nice and smoothly. There should be a process in place which identifies who's responsible for disclosing the details of a data breach within the business, who to communicate it to and when. There should be an up-to-date communications policy in place which all staff are aware of. So if there is an incident, they know who to communicate with, how to do it. This should also include, what can and can't be said to external parties. A business impact assessment should also be implemented, and a business continuity and disaster recovery plan should be created within the business and kept up to date. This should also include any type of contact numbers, names, addresses, email addresses that might be required during a disaster. The disaster recovery and business continuity plans should be tested at least annually to ensure that they still meet the needs for the business and that they work as they should. If not, there should be changes put in place, re-implemented, retested, and then going from there. And then it should all be signed off by someone senior within the business. If there's an incident, the logs should be checked for trends, and then when the systems are back up and running, there should be a lessons learned process put in place so everyone can learn from the incident, know what happened, how to resolve it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's it. That's the 13 themes for the IASME Cyber Assurance Standard. I hope this video has been informative for you. Please like and subscribe the video. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments below the video and we'll get back to you. But for now, see you next time.